Afternoon, everyone. Let me do just a short introduction of myself. I'm an analyst at the Kremlin Watch program with European values and moderator in a discussion about the energy as a tool of Russian influence. This discussion is funded by the European Union and the Black Sea Trust Marshall Fund. Allow me to welcome my three guests today. The director of the Dixie Group from Ukraine, Olena Pavlenko. We also have here the director of energy studies at World Experience in Georgia, Murman Mardevalashvili, and my dear colleague from European Values, also a Kremlin Watch analyst and an energy expert, František Marčík.
Good afternoon.
So if you wouldn't mind, let's get straight to it. And some opening words from Murman.
Oh, from me? Okay. So thank you very much. First of all, thank you for organizing this discussion, because the topic is very, very hot about Russia's use of energy as a weapon in view of what is happening in Europe, what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Moldova, and in other places. So I would just like to share with you several of my personal experiences in relation with Russia and its use of energy as a political tool. So first, let me recall the first flow of Azeri oil over Georgia in the early 2000s, which happened without Russia's control and which was a great achievement by that time. Second, let me recall 2006, January 22nd, coldest period in the winter, when Russia blew up the only gas source for Georgia on its territory and blew up the electricity transmission line and left us in cold and dark, just for changing our political direction. In 2013, I remember I was invited to Euronest Parliamentary Assembly to discuss the threats of energy dependence on Russia. And that was the exact time when Russia suggested to Moldova to reduce gas price by 30% in return to avoid not signing association agreement. In 2018, we had our minister negotiating with Gazprom, and he lost very profitable contract for energy transit from Russia to Armenia. Now we are transiting energy, Russian gas, to detrimental conditions for our countries. And most recent is the huge protest against hydropower development in Georgia that continues. And to my great suspicion, it is inspired and orchestrated not without support from our northern neighbor. So these are the manifestations of many different tools that Russia has in its arsenal. One is import dependence, transit dependence, that is so important in case of Ukraine, manipulation with break-even region, and that is also what is happening in our Abkhazia, like in Donbass and Transnistria in Moldova. I think we need to discuss a little bit about corruption, because that is one of the tools that are providing this avenues for Russian influence. And it is a multifaceted approach and deserves very strong counter reaction, which unfortunately I cannot observed neither from European countries, none from in a sufficient manner from our former Soviet countries. So that is something that really needs in-depth discussion and also action, and also involvement of policymakers and wide public, because it is not an easy task and requires a mobilization of our societies. So it was an improvised introduction, so I'm sorry if I'm not very to the point at this point, but I hope it opens the way for further discussion on this issue.
Of course, could I just ask you briefly what the energy savings that world experience for Georgia is considered its mission, and can you hear me well? Okay, so the mission of energy studies at the World of Georgia, which you're director of, and briefly introduce something about the project.
I will introduce our organization. We are a think tank working in Georgia, a small organization. We are working in energy sector since 2007. Mostly we are doing energy policy analysis in its various aspects, starting from sustainability and climate change, continued with energy security, and social aspects of energy poverty and subsidization. We have a very wide spectrum of occupation and operation, but obviously our main concern is the soundness of energy policy of Georgia, first of all, and cooperation also with our colleagues abroad, in order to have sound energy policies that would assure energy securities and independent development of Georgia, first of all, and also of all our colleagues and friend countries.
Okay, thank you. Can I now ask Ms. Olena Pavlenko for a brief introduction as well?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Olena Pavlenko. I'm a president of Dixie Group. This is a think tank which works in Ukraine. Like Murman's organizations, we also are working on energy issues, energy security, energy transparency, energy reforms in line with the EU legislation. By the way, let me announce that our and Murman's organizations will soon present with our Moldovan and Romanian colleagues the Energy Transparency Index, which will assess for our countries in terms of transparency of energy sectors. So yes, I think that will be really interesting and useful for the audience. Should I start my presentation now or later?
You can now. Why not? Let's get straight to it.
Let's then, yes, if I may start my presentation in a moment. So, do you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So, what's going on in the European markets now, and what is the role of Russia there? Because I would agree that, of course, Russia is not the only reason what is going on with the gas prices. The corona crisis, increase of speed of the economic development of many countries, demands from the Asian markets, all these factors exist, but at the same time, we have one factor which we should discuss today. Do you see my second slide? Do you see my second slide? Dear colleagues? So, what we see with the building of Nord Stream 2, if you look at the dates in September and October, you can see that in September, the Nord Stream 2 actually completed its construction. And in October, the Russian president announced that Russia is ready to fill the pipeline with the gas any moment. But at the same time, in accordance to the European legislation, the gas pipeline, the Nord Stream 2, should go through very clear and concrete procedures. The certification of the pipeline, which demands approvals not only from the German bodies, regulator in particular, but also the approvals from the European Commission. It takes time. It might take several months, and according to our calculations, it might take time until, let's say, March. But of course, Russia is not interested to wait until March when all procedures will be done. We think that what Russia is doing, it is trying to make a pressure on European Union to demand ignore all procedures and allow using Nord Stream 2 right now. Sorry, I have to ask again whether you see my slides, my next slide.
Yes,
Okay,
Russian
great.
gas export to the EU.
Yes, I just wanted to show you how what tools Russia is using to force or to make European countries to agree. This is actually the same what Ukraine had in 2006 and in 2009, when it was really dependent on Russian gas. So Europe is also dependent on Russian gas. Russian share is about 40%. So all such moves are definitely all such moves from Russian side are definitely visible and hard for European countries. So Russia started to decrease the level or the volume of gas supply to the EU. Every month, the volume of supply is decreasing, and you can see that starting from August, then in September, and then I will show also in October, the volumes of gas are decreasing simultaneously with the demand from Russian side to allow Nord Stream 2 to start operates. This is the data from our transmission system operator, just recent data. What's happening with gas transit through Ukraine this year? So the green line is the volumes which are contracted. They are more or less stable. But then you can see that Russia is trying to decrease every month gas supply through Ukrainian pipeline. You can see this in September, you can see this in October, and I think yesterday we also heard from our transmission system operator that again less amount of gas volumes is transporting through Ukrainian pipeline. Gazprom is saying that no, we are doing everything in accordance to all contracts. We fulfill all contracts, so we do not violate the rules. Maybe they fulfill the contracts, long-term contracts. That might be true, but Gazprom has other instruments to influence the gas prices on the EU market, which also mean fill or not to fill the storages which Gazprom owns in Europe. Such storages are in Germany, in Austria, and in other countries. And if you look at the gas storages, which usually are fully filled before the winter, you can see that Gazprom is not filling its storages with gas on 100%. So yes, probably they are fulfilling their contracts, but they don't want to do anything more which might decrease the level of gas prices on the market. And several words on disinformation. I just wanted to pay your attention to the statements which Russian President Putin said recently, that Ukrainian gas pipeline cannot transport gas, a lot of volume of gas, because it can burst. But if you look at the right graph to the right, you can see that actually Ukraine transported much more volumes which we are transporting now. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So there were no problems with transportation of much more volumes of gas than we are transporting now. So if Russia wants to save Europe, and if Russia wants to decrease gas prices, it can easily use Ukrainian gas pipeline to do so. And as a final slide and final statement, what the map is about. So usually when you say about safety of the pipeline, or possibility or not possibility to burst, you can see how many leakages the pipeline has. So if the pipeline has a lot of leakages, methane leakages, it means that yes, the pipeline has problems. If the methane leakages are on low level, so the pipeline is quite well constructed and modernized. So now this colorful yes circles actually show how many methane leakages are in Russia and in Russian pipelines, in Belarus and Ukraine, and you can actually easily compare pipelines in Ukraine and Russia, and I think make some decisions for yourself what pipelines in what countries are more or less modernized, and what pipelines can be burnt in case of something. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Olena. I will just let the audience know that any questions are thoroughly welcome. And now I will move to our final speaker, František Marčík, before we do an open discussion with all of us who are here. So Franta, if you would be so kind.
Yes, good afternoon again. Thank you for having me. I will probably choose quite a different perspective. I will focus on the current situation, mostly from the Central European perspective, let's say, which is in a way related to our colleague's situation, but also in other areas, let's say it's different. So first of all, if we want to discuss what can be done about the current, let's say, energy crisis, we need to understand what actually has happened in the last weeks. From my understanding, even though Kremlin and also disinformation platforms are claiming that the main reason why the electricity prices skyrocketed in the last weeks and months in the European Union, they are claiming the main reason is European Green Deal. That means the international, let's say, determined contribution that the European Union actually claimed to make in terms of decreasing its greenhouse gas emissions. But in fact, I would say the main reason is that several negative factors met in time, and there was a sort of perfect storm that was created. So first of all, there was a very long and cold spring, so there was very high demand for natural gas. Second, there was we could also observe in the global economies some, let's say, higher demand for natural gas worldwide, mostly in Asia, because there was, let's say, post-COVID economic recovery in these regions. Third, also, of course, there was also some part of the current situation can be attributed to the European Green Deal, which has to do with the slightly increased the prices of ETS. That is the emission trading system, European emission trading system for the fossil fuel power stations, also, and big power sources such. But maybe some minor effect can be attributed also to the German policy of energy, when that means the phase out of nuclear power plants. But this is very let's say, minor effect, I would say, in this situation. And mostly, and that's probably the biggest reason to my understanding, is the increasing price of natural gas. And there's question it still needs to be, let's say, discussed and investigated by the European Commission, whether this was done on purpose, whether we observed market price manipulation by Gazprom in the last weeks, or this was caused by some objective factors. Just to show you the main difference in the price, we'll just show one graph comparing the prices of the ETS trading system, which is the green part. We could see that there was only let's say, several 10 euros increase in the last year. However, if you compare the price of gas, so you can see that the increase of price was much higher. So Kremlin is definitely wrong when saying the main reason behind the current situation is European Green Deal. So this is for when it comes to the description of the current situation. What can be done about it? First of all, to my understanding, the Kremlin is trying right now to make pressure in several ways. Let's say, first of all, it's definitely Germany, as Lena already discussed, quite it's supposed to really, let's say, not only Germany, but mostly Germany to finish the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And second, they are trying to cause sort of panic, let's say, to push concrete new member states to sign long-term deals with Gazprom, which is definitely not not good way to go, because it's important to stress that the common European market has made electricity prices in the last years very, say, low and is very competitive. So there is many ways how it can be regulated. So this is something that Gazprom doesn't want. It wants to go the same way as, for instance, with Hungary, to make a long-term contract for natural gas. So this is one thing which can be done about it, to avoid any long-term contract with Gazprom and to buy the natural gas on the European market. Second, we can invest in many different ways of our own energy sources, which are not dependent on Russia. So there are, for instance, in the case of the Central European countries, which are heavily dependent on fossil fuels and have a lot of mostly coal power plants, and so there are many of these countries are right now thinking about going for nuclear power plants. It's up to their decision, of course, but they should try to avoid a very similar scenario as Budapest and the government of Viktor Orbán chose. That means to sign a direct contract with Rosatom, because this is a straight way to put it that way, to put it bluntly. So this is something which we were able to do so far in the Czech Republic, even though there were very strong, I'd say, press. There was very strong press mostly from the Czech president who is very strongly pro-Kremlin and is surrounded by Russian agents and Russian puppets, let's say. So Kremlin puppets, let's say. So this is something which civil society and the opposition political parties were able to let's say so far were able to avoid, and I think this scenario also can be copied by other EU member states. In other words, if there is a strong demand for nuclear power sources, Russian and also Chinese companies should not be let's say allowed to participate on the nuclear bid or nuclear tender. So this is very important to mention. And also, of course, any other investment in low carbon technologies, be it renewables or energy savings, or different types of accumulation or whatever. Every country has a very different situation. So every investment in energy self-sufficiency and is also an investment into its own energy security. I would put it that way. And that, I would finish here probably.
Okay, thank you, Fanta. So I think we can now move into the open discussion, and we've had three great intros on how Russia or Kremlin uses their gas into putting European countries into coercing European countries into the Kremlin strategy. But I would like to know, and it's open to anyone, how are the Russian narratives or Russian or Kremlin-based moves or strategies presented through disinformation or through other tools of hybrid warfare in your countries? If you know what I mean, like the classic anti-climatic agenda and general anti-liberal, anti-Green Deal, if you know what I mean. So anyone who wants to take the word? I think, Murman, you're speaking, but we can't hear you. That's fine.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So for me, it's relatively easy because we do not have diplomatic connections with Russia after the war in 2008 and their occupation of our 20% of our territories. So there is no official directed flow of Russian misinformation directed specifically openly over media channels to Georgian population, although there are some related not very popular channels that still spread out some misinformation, but mostly those are related to let me not continue that way. So actually what we see, and we have great suspicion of hybrid attacks on Georgia in energy sector. That is a targeted propaganda against any infrastructure development in Georgia. Mm-hmm. This is specifically directed to opposition to hydropower plants, which is camouflaged as environmental movement. But this also reminds similar things that were happening in Ukraine and other places against shale gas, for instance, some years ago, and that NATO Secretary General has mentioned as use of these populistic movements against development in those countries. So that is one thing that we observe here as a directed hybrid intervention in our country.
And how do you think the civil societies or the general public can defend or can oppose to these tactics?
Complex thing because you have this sentiments of they are pro environment. So in order to really differentiate the truth from non-truth, real concerns from non-real concerns, you have to do a lot of work. We are very behind on this, honestly speaking. One important thing, and this is in relation to any aspects of Russia's influence, countries need to have very strong and well-developed state strategies in energy sector that would be backed up by strong analytical groups and would have a strong support of policymakers, so that it is not easy to derail any development in our countries by external influences. So that would give you a kind of general guidelines. And then you obviously need a lot of work with public opinion, because still, although there are no this official information channels, the media channels, but this goes through a different type, like similar to anti-vaxxers. You know, I don't know how to qualify that type of channels that neglects the current knowledge, that neglects science, best practices, and so on. Through those society channels of interaction, I think that Russia manages to spread out a lot of disinformation that way.
Okay, thank you, Murman. I have a follow-up question for Olena. Could you describe some of these tactics, how Russia tries to justify their strategy in Ukraine, and how is it presented to the Ukrainian public?
Yeah, actually, I would divide like types, yes, of Russian behavior in Ukraine into three types. So the first type is Russia is sharing a sort of disinformation very similarly as in very similar way as it is doing in the EU. For example, on vaccination issues, yes, we have pretty the same messages here. Second is the messages which are sharing at the in energy sector. For example, we noticed a lot of publications and information that the winter will be just we all will die in the winter because the government and the country is not able to deal with the energy crisis. And the third issue, the third problem is that Russia is trying to create such crisis in Ukraine. So if you look at what's going on now in the electricity sector in Ukraine, you can see that Russia stopped coal supply to Ukraine starting from November, and it also, as of now, does not allow electricity import. So it might create some problems in electricity sector for Ukraine in winter. But again, this is very similar what Europe has now with gas. And this is a very good lessons learned for all of us, that if you are dependent on any energy source from Russia, you should be very careful and avoid the situation when such sources, such resources could be used as a weapon against you.
Okay. And same thing, same follow-up question. How can the society in Ukrainian, or what would you be your suggestion for them to put up an effective resistance to this?
I think everything comes to the education of the society. So if the same as vaccination, yes. So if you understand and you can properly assess different information, and you are educated enough to understand what is true and what is just emotions, that might help the whole country to go the right way and avoid such information wars. So, of course, there are no ideal situations in any country. But for Ukraine, I think this is a good strategy to educate as many people as possible. For civil society, yes, it's also a good task, and especially to work with journalists, because journalists, they have to work very fast. They have to get information and analyze it very fast, and so they should be able to separate, emotions from facts and make really objective decisions.
Thank you, Olena. I will now move to Franta again, and maybe tell him about, or ask him about the narratives, how they work in Czech Republic, the Kremlin-based narratives, how they present their strategy in the Czech Republic.
Actually, I'm not an expert on this information, but to my knowledge, that I share from my colleagues who deal with these topics, I must say that the thing with the Czech Republic is quite different, because it's not mostly the Russian platforms, as far as we know, spreading this information. Is in majority the Czech platforms. Of course, that many times they share or spread the originally Russian narratives, but mostly it's a Czech disinformation platforms, such who might be probably are in some cases funded by the Kremlin, but we don't know much about it. But at the same time, and this is from my perspective more dangerous, there are some, let's say, mainstream democratic politicians sharing these narratives. Even, for instance, when we look at the power and the current situation in the power and electricity sector, it's the main political party actually, and some of the representatives sharing these narratives. And this has nothing to do with the pro-Russian orientation of this party or of these politicians, but it has something to do with business interests, because there are still many, let's say, many influential or several influential oligarchs who have a lot of money invested mostly in coal power plants, and these people do not want any changes at all in the energy and power sector. In other words, they want to stop or avoid any energy transformation. So therefore, they are lobbying these politicians, and unfortunately, there are some people who listen to these businessmen, or oligarchs. So yeah, this is kind of scaring in my perspective more than the usual, like the usual suspects. So yeah.
Yes, on the oligarch topic, I would just like to mention that our prime minister, or ex-prime minister soon to be, who's been upheld in various courts around European Union as an ex-KGB agent. He literally said that Europe will never stop being dependent on Russian gas. So you can see the links between oligarchs and people of power who have Russian influence behind them. Basically piggybacking on what Franta said, and I also know that Franta is very good with because the situation in our region is that Russia is trying to get into the tender for a nuclear power plant, which which is going to be pushed through. So I would like to ask Franta to give us a little bit about that, about like Dukovany.
Yeah, that's kind of difficult situation to describe. It's very complex. Yeah, so I would try to be very brief. So in the last, let's say, 2 years, so there was this nuclear bid running. It was a preparation of the nuclear bid for a new nuclear reactor in Dukovany, which is where already 4 reactors are running, and these 4 reactors are supposed to end their life in 2045. So there was this discussion whether there should be a new reactor replacing the old ones. And indeed, as I already mentioned, there was a very strong pressure mostly from the Prague castle. That means the Czech president Miloš Zeman, who is strongly pro-Russian and who has quite a big influence over our former prime minister, but he lost the last election, so he won't be the next prime minister quite probably. So, and since the main company who is behind the tender, the CES, which is still owned majorly by the state, it didn't want to go the normal tender way, because they had very bad experience from the last tender, which basically collapsed, which took 5 years and ended badly for them. So they went for this, they call it security exemption from the public procurement law. That meant that there were intelligence services and security and other security institutions involved in the process of the bid preparation from the very beginning, which was actually at the end of the day a very good decision from our perspective, or because this allowed to forbid basically the Russian state-owned military agency, who is responsible not only for running and producing nuclear power plants, but mostly for producing nuclear military arsenal and taking care of it. So so it's not a normal company or normal business subject. It's military entity, let's say. So so this Rosatom was not at the end of the day allowed to participate on the tender, and it was the same case with the Chinese companies. So yeah, this is very. We were very lucky, and unfortunately, our government was not as the Hungarian one strongly pro-Russian. However, the government of Viktor Orban in 2014, when Orban traveled to Moscow and met Lavrov, after he came back to Budapest, he announced that there was a direct contract made between Moscow and Budapest, and that Rosatom will build the Paks 2, the new reactor, two new reactors in Paks 2. So this was not the case of the Czech Republic. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Franta. I'd just like to say that we have a question from the audience. It's from Jiří Ruzek, so I will read it. And I think it's directly mainly at Murman and Olena. So is Ukraine or Georgia somehow cooperating with the EU in terms of fighting the Kremlin disinfo war? For example, with the Baltic countries, where the experience with fighting this problem is quite vast. So either one of you can answer, or I'll ask Olena first because I asked Merman first.
That would be fair.
Time.
Yes, that would be fair. So first of all, I have to say that we have quite a lot of initiatives in Ukraine, which I would say are quite strong in fighting with Russian disinformation and manipulation. We have Stop Fake initiative. We have several other several civil society initiatives and journalists also initiatives which are monitoring potential manipulation from pro-Russian sources or by Russia and highlighted in Ukraine and also abroad. I know that even some European institutions at the beginning of such information war, they had quite a close cooperation with Ukrainian such Ukrainian initiatives, because I think Ukrainians have more experience in catching and understanding and separating disinformation from information from Russia's side. I cannot give you very concrete facts and figures to answer this question, but I'm pretty sure that the EU and also NATO and some other security organizations, they cooperate with Ukrainian civil society and I believe also government bodies to fight against disinformation and manipulation in Ukraine. So I think Ukraine is part of this global movement.
Okay, thank you. And Murman for Georgia.
Well, I'm not an expert on disinformation. I can just comment as a usual citizen. I think that there is, I would repeat what Olena mentioned, pretty good cooperation with the European Union, but most of the cooperation, I believe, is going at the civil society level. Although security forces, what they are doing, they don't report to me, so I'm not so sure. One thing that I want to mention in relation, in general, to the attitude towards this misinformation, there is a basic deficiency that I observe everywhere, including Georgia, European platforms, I don't know, maybe even Ukraine, that it is a reaction to the already happened attack. So once the misinformation is already spread, then you are only part of the people who are subject to this misinformation can really think about it, and you cannot really reverse its effect. So some new ways need to be found, and those ways should be proactive rather than reactive in order to have some sizable effect actually in protection. And that's a general comment that I have everywhere where I go, in European forums, in other countries. Everywhere it is the same. Once something happens, then there is the reaction. That's bad, but only very small fraction of people who are affected can really be turned around.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for Olena. What do you think is the future development with the energy coercion in Ukraine in both near and more further ahead?
You mean energy sector in general?
Just no, my bad. I probably misspoke. I'm thinking the general way how Kremlin uses energy as a tool of coercion. So what would maybe your personal opinion be on the future development?
Okay. First of all, I would like to remind that again, Ukraine had experience to go through the gas crises and this gas crisis and sort of gas wars with Russia in 2006, in 2009, and after Ukraine started to buy gas from Europe, so we started this reverse gas flow from Europe. You can see that this level of tensions in Ukrainian gas market it decreased. So, which I think can again prove that if you have several sources of gas supply, and it is not only Russian source, you will have more security and reliability of your energy sector. And probably again, this might be a good lessons learned for European countries, especially European Union as a whole, which still is dependent also on Russian source. Second, we have, as I said before, we had some dependency from coal supply. We also have some dependency in nuclear sector. And when we have emergencies in electricity sector, we also used before import of electricity from Belarus and Russia. Mm-hmm. This year showed us that we also have to find solutions and not to rely on this dependency in the future. And joining Ukraine to ENTSO-E system will be the at least one of the solutions. So answering your question, I think that in the short term, Ukraine will have to work very hard to join European electricity system and SOE, and decrease its dependency also in electricity sector. In the long term, it demands from Ukraine to reform its energy sector much more deeper than we have now. I mean decarbonization, I mean further development of renewables, I mean coal phase out. All these things they are already in the Ukrainian agenda. What we have to do is to implement this agenda and move forward with NDC adopted, with national energy and climate plans, which should be adopted soon, and the strategy to 2020. So I don't know whether I answered your question. Happy to talk more, but I just want to save some time for other questions.
Of course, could I just ask you as a follow-up, how do you think European Union should or what should the European Union choose as a strategy to have an effective support for Ukraine?
First of all, I think this is this is to continue communication, very close communication with Ukraine at all levels, at the governmental level, civil society level, national and local level. So communication is key, because if there is no communication, there might be gaps and possibilities for manipulations, and including from Russian side. Second, I think I mentioned education, because you cannot do all reforms only, with hands of some Europeans or some colleagues several colleagues from Western or Eastern Europe. You have to train local people, and then they should continue the mid-term and long-term reforms. Third, of course, it's investments and access to funds. I mean, I will not be fair if I will not mention the costs and funds issues, because all these transformations will demand a lot of money. Coal phase out means work with several thousands of miners, just people who work in mines. Implementation of or increasing share of renewables means a lot of foreign investments. Nuclear, yes, modernization, the same issue. So all these things will demand a lot of support, also financial support. And I believe this is something where Ukraine and the EU should also work.
Okay, thank you. I'd love to talk more about this with you, but as you said, we're shortly running out of time. So I would like.
Sorry, I would, if I may, I would like to mention.
Of course, my bad.
No. It's sorry. I just wanted to mention to come back again to gas issue, because I started with gas. Maybe I also will finish with gas, and I would like, in a short-term perspective, I would like to underline that it is really very important for Europe to meet all European legislation in terms of Nord Stream 2. And not to follow this blackmail from Russian side, and not to allow Russia win in this gas crisis squid game.
Okay, thank you so much, Olena. Again, for the inputs, for the suggestions, and for joining us. And I would like to say or bring the similar question back to Czech Republic, to Franta. So what do you think are going to be the developments in the near future and in the long term?
You mean in the Czech Republic, or but also
in the Czech Republic? In the Czech Republic.
Oh. Yeah, I've already probably mentioned it or described in a way. I believe that we are going to see with the new government, which is mostly going to be constituted from so-called pro-democratic parties, that unfortunately some of the parties, or maybe just one, but the most important one, will closely cooperate with I call them conservative businessmen in energy and power sector. So this probably cause not only definitely some slowdown of the needed transformations, and it's mostly a matter of new legislation, basically the implementation of so-called clean energy for all, which is 8 European directions and regulations which should allow to let's say bottom-up transformation of the energy sector, mostly on the household levels and municipality levels. But there will be strong opposition, I believe, from these actors. But at the same time, there is definitely quite a lot of money coming from the European Union, either be it to Just Transition Fund for the coal mining regions, but also to modernization funds, and so there will be definitely some change in the next 4 years in terms of new renewables in installments, because in the last 10 years we basically have not seen any new renewables added to the grid, only on a very small amount. So there will be new big projects, I believe, no matter of what the new government will do. That's so we will see quite significant changes, I believe, but at the same time not sufficient in my perspective. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. And the same. What do you think the European Union should do in order to support Czech Republic against, of course, against being a victim to coercion by energy from Kremlin?
That's a very tricky question. Well, who is the European Union? You know, because right now what we are seeing is that there is on one side mostly Berlin advocating natural gas and easy money for new natural gas projects. It's on one side. On the second side, it's there's France advocating nuclear. So we will probably see under the EU taxonomy, which that the natural gas and nuclear power plants will be considered as clean sources, which will basically mean that they will be able to get much better conditions when the businessman will want to ask for money at the bank. So this is. So I'm not definitely sure that this should be the case of natural gas. Definitely not. There's a lot of talk about the importance of natural gas, but I think that Germany should reconsider its Energiewende. It should postpone the phase out of nuclear power plants under the current situation, and wait at least for 10 years or so and definitely should stop it. Should do anything possible to stop the finalization of Nord Stream 2. So this is on the German side mostly, and European Union, European Commission, it officially should be independent, on the political influence in a way, but at the same time, in reality, it works mostly how the governments of individual countries want. So, and it's mostly Germany and France deciding these days. So, and on the European Parliament, there is probably much better hope. So, but I don't know. First of all, the situation should be clear right now. That should be in our case. That's definitely what the European Union might help, be it Commission or Parliament. we definitely would need some kind of help in explanation that of the current situation, as I tried to do at the beginning of my speech. That means that it's not actually European Green Deal behind the current situation, but that's actually Kremlin mostly behind it, and that there should be very clear communication in that perspective. And I hope the European Commission will finish the investigation of possible potential price manipulation, which is of course against the European legislation, quite soon. It will not be a long time, and so we know the result, whether Kremlin or Gazprom prices.
Okay, thank you, Franta. And then finally, back to Georgia, to Murman. Same question: How can the European Union show, or I mean, that's the follow-up. My bad. How do you think the situation will develop in Georgia in short term and in long term?
Well, situation in Georgia is very turbulent right now politically, so I would not take the courage of forecasting, but I would react to your question about what European Union can do to support Ukraine or Czech Republic. I would add Georgia to that. And there are long and short-term answers to that. In short term, it has to put itself together, mobilize and survive this winter against Russia's pressure, and try to keep Nord Stream 2 under the regular procedure, try to extend European legislation over Nord Stream to limit its throughput capacity. That would give a great relief to Ukraine. And it would also be a demonstration of the promise that we do not see happening about solidarity and trust, which is the basic slogans of European strategy of energy union. Okay, so those things should be materialized, and Europe has to put itself together strongly, first of all, and show real solidarity. That would be a solution for everybody, including European Union, ourselves, Ukraine, Czech Republic, and everybody. Because that is a strong pressure and attack that we are observing right now, and there are possibilities to within European law to limit the influence and bad effect that Nord Stream 2 can have over European Union, Ukraine, and other countries. In general, Russia's influence in energy sector, we have several weak points. One weak point that I briefly mentioned is our governments and their capacity to strategically withstand Russia's influence. So they are changing with elections, not prepared always, and so on. This is why I was mentioning to have sound strategic capacities to be developed in our countries. That would create safeguards and the limits to the freedom of our policymakers, including those in Eastern European countries, and that would create the safeguards against Russian influence. Another weak point is corruption and elite networks, which are in all of our countries. And there, we just finished together a few months ago a study with participation of Dixie groups and 5 other countries, where we have studied the typical cases of corruption in energy sector. It was a very interesting thinking exercise that showed a lot of similarities and weak points. And the major conclusion for myself was that everywhere the weakest point is collusion between business elites and government elites, and they are the channel for Russian influence. So this needs to be somehow contained, and this needs to be somehow blocked. And the best way of doing so is what Olena is doing, for instance, transparency in energy sector. Also, we are thinking to create what European Union is helping us to do in our countries to reform our energy sector according to European energy acquis that creates competition, that creates transparency and sound regulations. Those things are that need to be implemented. And I think there is some more methodic work to be done on energy corruption that would help to figure out the ways how to block this freedom of business elites and their colluded interests with the political elites, not to become the conductors and conveyors of Russian interests. So those are kind of a little bit longer term things. And obviously also this hybrid intervention in our societies, which is a much wider general topic, and it requires also our coordinated action. At first, we need to realize that this is a real threat. Unfortunately, the front line of war with Russia's war is not going only on geographical borders. So it goes in values within our societies, and how to withstand to that. That is a big question that requires, much more time probably for discussion than we have today.
Of course.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. So speaking of time, we're basically out of it. So I want to, and thank you for these final remarks, everyone. And generally, if anyone has still something to say, then please take the floor. And if not, then we have no more questions from the audience. So I would like to thank you for joining us today. And hopefully we will we can meet each other in person and maybe discuss some further steps or something, or cooperate on different projects. So if anyone is not, if anyone
Thank you,
has
dear
something,
colleagues. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
okay. So I think we can say goodbye.